The desert didn't whisper that morning. It screamed. Wind howled through the broken spines of cactus, and the red dust of Arizona rose like smoke from a dying fire. Jonah Reed, a drifter with a half-healed bullet scar across his ribs, guided his weary horse along a dry creek bed. He hadn't spoken to a soul in 4 days, and that was how he liked it. Solitude was a kinder companion than memory, but memory rode with him anyway. He was following coyote tracks toward the hills when he caught a flicker of color where nothing alive should have been. A thread of fabric twisting in the wind. He reined in hard. The mare snorted, uneasy. Jonah slid off the saddle, rifle in hand, boots crunching over the brittle earth. The smell reached him first. Smoke, metal, and something darker. Beyond a cluster of scorched mesquite trees stood a crossbeam of rough wood. At first, he thought it was a scarecrow left behind by ranchers. Then he saw the movement. A hand, limp, fingers trembling. A girl hung there. Her wrists were bound above her head with wire, her body swaying faintly with the wind. A wooden board was nailed to the post just above her hair. On it, scrawled in black tar, were the words, "She betrayed her own." Jonah froze. His stomach twisted. The words bled with meaning he didn't understand, yet. He scanned the ridgeline. Nothing but vultures circling in the pale sky. No horses, no smoke trails, no sign of the ones who did this. He lowered his rifle and stepped closer. The girl's face was streaked with ash and blood, her dark hair tangled with sand. She looked young, too young for hate to have found her. Her chest rose shallowly. She was alive. Jonah's voice cracked the silence. "Easy now. I'm not here to hurt you." No answer, only a dry moan that made the back of his throat ache. He climbed up the post, pulling at the twisted wire with his bare hands. It sliced his skin, but he didn't stop until it snapped. The girl collapsed forward, and he caught her before she hit the ground. She was fever-hot, bones sharp beneath torn skin. A necklace made of carved bone hung around her neck, snapped in half. "Who did this to you?" he whispered. Her lips moved. One word came out: brothers. He didn't know if she meant family or tribe, but the word chilled him more than the wind. Jonah carried her to a patch of shade under the rocks, propped her against his pack, and poured water from his canteen onto her cracked lips. She drank in ragged gasps, eyes fluttering open just long enough for him to see the terror hiding behind them. She wasn't just hurt, she was hunted. He turned toward the horizon again. There, faint in the distance, a thin column of smoke rising where the creek bent south. Whoever left her here wasn't done. Jonah cursed under his breath, torn between leaving and saving her. He had seen too much blood spilled for other people's sins, but something in her broken stillness anchored him. He pulled his coat from his horse and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Don't die on me," he muttered. "Not out here." Her fingers gripped his sleeve, faint but deliberate. That tiny touch sealed his choice. By sundown, Jonah Reed was no longer a drifter. He was a man running from the same devils that left a girl hanging beneath the desert sun. And somewhere behind him, in the smoke-filled valley, a new message was being carved into wood. This time, with his name on it. By the time Jonah Reed reached the canyon mouth, the sun had given up. What light remained clung to the horizon like dying embers, staining the rocks blood red. The girl lay slumped across his saddle, motionless except for the faint rise and fall of her chest. He didn't ride toward town. Towns asked questions, and questions drew guns. Instead, he turned west, where the land folded into a forgotten canyon, a place no map bothered to name. He had camped there once years ago, back when his hands were still clean and his heart hadn't learned to go quiet. The horse stumbled over loose stone as the shadows thickened. Jonah pressed on. When he finally reached the hollow, he slid down, his muscles trembling. He laid the girl on a bedroll near the cold ashes of an old campfire. The night air was sharp, carrying the scent of iron and dust. Her skin burned like a forge. Fever. He'd seen it before, in soldiers dying slow, in men who'd bled too long before finding a doctor. But this one hadn't bled out. She was fighting something deeper. He poured water into a dented tin cup and touched it to her lips. She didn't stir. Jonah muttered under his breath, "Don't make me bury another stranger, girl." He tore strips from his shirt, soaked them, and laid them across her forehead and wrists. As he worked, he noticed the marks. Thin, symmetrical scars on her forearms, some fresh, some old. He'd seen the kind before. Ritual cuts, self-inflicted maybe, or signs of punishment. He didn't know which truth was worse. Her necklace caught the firelight, carved bone, cracked down the middle. When he lifted it, he saw faint etchings on the back, a symbol of two wings bound by a circle. He couldn't read it, but it felt like something sacred. Something desecrated. The wind shifted, and the horse snorted nervously. Jonah looked up. Across the ridge, fire flickered. 3 torches, moving slow, deliberate. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. "They're tracking," he whispered. He killed the small fire and pulled his rifle close. In the dim light, the girl stirred for the first time. Her eyes opened, dark, unfocused, yet ancient. "Don't let them take me," she rasped. Her voice cracked like dry bark. Jonah knelt beside her. "Who are they?" Her lips trembled. "My kin, and not my kin." He frowned. "What does that mean?" She swallowed painfully. "They call me traitor. Say I led the soldiers to our camp." Her breath hitched. "But I didn't. I only went for water. When I came back, everything was burning." Jonah's stomach sank. He'd seen enough massacres to fill 3 lifetimes. But hearing it in her voice made the silence after heavier than gunfire. "What's your name?" he asked. Her eyes drifted toward the sky, unfocused. "Maya," she whispered. "It means forgiven. But no one forgives me now." Jonah felt something twist inside him, a familiar ache, sharp and old. He reached for his canteen again, forcing calm into his hands. "You're safe here, Maya." She blinked once, slow and uncertain. No one's safe in this land. Then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed into sleep. Jonah sat there a long time, listening to the wind drag sand across the stone. He wanted to believe she was wrong, that safety still existed somewhere beyond the scars of this desert. But he'd buried too many truths under the same sand to lie to himself anymore. He leaned back against a rock, staring toward the ridge where the torches had vanished. His mind went to another fire, another night, years ago, when he had come home from a cattle run to find his cabin burned to the ground. His wife and son gone. They said it was Apaches. Maybe it was. Maybe not. The only thing left unburned was a single shoe, small enough to fit in the palm of his hand. That night, Jonah had sworn never to save another soul. Now here he was, hands raw from cutting wire, heart tangled in something he didn't understand. The wind carried a sound, a coyote's howl, long and low. Jonah pulled the girl's blanket higher, checked his rifle, and waited for dawn. When the first light touched the canyon walls, she was awake, sitting upright. The fever had broken, but her expression was changed, distant, haunted. "You should have left me," she said flatly. Jonah poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Guess I'm not good at doing what I should." Her gaze lifted toward him, wary but curious. "You don't even know who I am." He sipped his own cup. "Don't need to. I just know the desert ain't got enough graves to feed on another innocent." For the first time she smiled, faintly, bitterly. "Then you don't know this desert." Her words hung in the air like a prophecy. A few minutes later, Jonah walked out to check the horse trail. What he saw turned his blood cold. A fresh set of boot prints, pressed deep and deliberate, leading straight toward the canyon mouth. Maya's kin had found them, or her hunters. He didn't know which was worse. Jonah crouched by the prints, tracing one with his thumb. The edges were crisp, no more than a few hours old. Whoever made them wasn't rushing. They were stalking. He rose slowly, eyes scanning the canyon walls. The air was still. Too still. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. Back at the camp, Maya knelt near the ashes, her eyes wary. She saw the look on Jonah's face and didn't ask. She already knew. "They're close," he said. She didn't flinch. "They won't stop until I'm dead." Jonah tightened the strap on his rifle. "Then we better make 'em work for it." He packed fast. Water, jerky, bullets. Maya tried to stand but staggered. He caught her arm. The fever might have broken, but exhaustion still clung to her bones. "Can you ride?" "If I can breathe, I can ride," she said, defiance flickering beneath her calm. Jonah almost smiled. Fire, he thought. She's still got fire left. By mid-morning, they were riding through the dry gulch. The sun burned overhead, a white eye watching without pity. For miles, the only sound was the horse's hooves crunching gravel and the faint creak of leather. Then came the echo. Distant at first, then closer. Another horse. Jonah jerked the reins, pulling them into a shallow ravine. He dismounted, pulling Maya down beside him. They crouched behind a boulder, the heat pressing against their backs. 3 riders emerged at the mouth of the canyon, moving in a tight triangle. One wore a dark coat with a silver badge glinting on his chest. The other 2 were natives, Apache, their faces painted in ash and white clay. Jonah's jaw tightened. A mixed posse, lawmen and vengeance, a dangerous blend. "Which ones are yours?" Jonah whispered. Maya's voice cracked. "The 2 with paint. The one in the middle, he's my cousin." Jonah's eyes flicked to her. "Your cousin? He thinks I led soldiers to our camp. He watched them hang my father. Now he wants to hang me." Her voice didn't shake, but her hands did. The men stopped where the canyon split in 2. The leader dismounted, scanning the dust like a wolf sniffing a trail. He knelt, touched the ground, then turned to his companions. "They'll find us," Maya murmured. "He always finds what he hunts." Jonah chambered around into his rifle. "Not today." He gestured toward the far ridge. "Up there, see that narrow path? If we can get to the plateau, they'll lose sight of us." She hesitated. "There's no cover." He gave a grim smile. "That's the point. Nobody looks for the living where the living can't survive." They scrambled up the slope, boots sliding on loose stone. Below, the men's voices echoed, sharp, angry, getting closer. Dust plumed where horses kicked against the canyon floor. Halfway up, Maya slipped. Jonah grabbed her wrist just in time, hauling her up by sheer will. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts. "Keep going," he hissed. A rifle cracked. Stone exploded beside them, spraying shards into the air. "They've seen us." Jonah shoved her behind a ridge and returned fire. One shot, precise, deliberate. It struck the lead rider's hat clean off. The echo rolled through the canyon like thunder. The hunters pulled back for cover, firing blindly. Bullets whined off rock. Jonah's rifle clicked empty. He ducked down, chest heaving. 6 left, he muttered. "For them or for us?" Maya asked, eyes dark. "Depends who's quicker." The next shot tore through his sleeve, grazing his arm. Blood bloomed through the fabric. Maya grabbed his knife, pressing her palm against the cut. "You're bleeding too much." He met her gaze, fierce, unyielding. "Better me than you." For a moment, silence. Then the faint, metallic sound of boots on rock, climbing. The hunters were coming on foot now. Jonah looked around. The ridge narrowed to a sharp ledge with a 50-foot drop. Behind them, nothing but sky and the long fall of the desert floor. "We can't outrun them," Maya whispered. Jonah's mind raced. Then his eyes caught something. An old mining cart track leading into a dark fissure carved into the cliffside. "There," he said, pointing. "Go." They dashed toward it, ducking into the shadows just as a bullet shattered the rock beside Maya's shoulder. The passage was narrow, the air thick with dust and echoes. Their footsteps seemed to chase them. At the far end, the tunnel opened into a cavern, wide, dim, and filled with the rusted bones of an abandoned mine. Lantern hooks hung from the ceiling, and old rail carts sat derailed in silence. Jonah lit a match, the glow flickering across broken tools and cave drawings, symbols of birds, suns, and fire. Maya froze when she saw them. "This was my people's," she whispered. "Before the miners came." Jonah nodded grimly. "Guess they left more than gold here." Behind them, voices grew louder. The posse was closing in. Jonah turned to her. "You hide, deep as you can go. If I don't come back—" She cut him off. "Don't say that." He looked at her. Really looked. And saw in her eyes the same fear that had lived in his for years. The terror of losing someone again. "I've already lost too much," he said softly. "This time I'm choosing who walks away." Then he stepped out into the open tunnel. The first man appeared seconds later. The one with the badge. Jonah fired before the man could raise his rifle. The echo slammed through the cave like thunder. Another shot. Another cry. Then silence. Jonah waited, a whisper of feet behind him. He spun, too late. The cousin lunged from the shadows, knocking him hard against the wall. The knife flashed in the dim light. Jonah caught the wrist mid-swing, twisting. The blade clattered to the ground. They grappled, rolling in the dust, fists landing hard. The cousin slammed Jonah's head into the rock. Stars exploded behind his eyes. "You took her," the cousin snarled. "You took the traitor." Jonah spat blood. "I saved her. She doesn't deserve saving." Jonah's voice came like gravel. "Then neither do I." He drove his elbow up, catching the man's jaw, grabbed the knife, and thrust it upward. The cousin fell back, still, silent, eyes wide in disbelief. Maya appeared behind him, trembling, her hand over her mouth. Jonah stared at the body, chest heaving. "He would have killed us both." Her voice was barely a whisper. "He already did." The sound of distant hoofbeats echoed through the canyon again. More riders were coming. Jonah met her eyes. "Then we keep running." He grabbed her hand, and they vanished into the labyrinth of tunnels. Two hunted souls swallowed by the mountain, carrying with them the ghosts of everyone they could not save. They ran until the light vanished behind them. The mind swallowed sound, swallowed breath, swallowed the world. Jonah's lantern flickered weakly, throwing gold ribbons of light across the walls. Timber beams groaned above them, old as the bones of the earth. Every step stirred echoes that came back slower, lower, as if something unseen was following just beyond the glow. They stopped only when the tunnel opened into a cavern so wide it might have once held a river. Piles of rusted ore carts and broken pickaxes lay half buried in dust. The air was thick with silence and the metallic taste of old ghosts. Jonah leaned against the wall, chest heaving. Blood seeped through the torn fabric of his shirt. The wound from the fight was deep. Maya knelt beside him, tearing a strip from her sleeve. "You're bleeding again," she said, voice tight. He gave a half smile. "You keep saying that like it's news." She ignored him, pressing the cloth to the wound. He hissed, muscles tensing. She didn't flinch. "Hold still." "I am." "No, you're not. You're shaking." "That's not fear," he muttered. "That's pain." Her eyes lifted to his. Dark, luminous, searching. "You don't fear pain?" Jonah's voice dropped low, almost tender. "Not the kind I can bleed out." For a moment, their faces were inches apart. The flicker of the lantern painted her skin in amber and shadow, her breath shallow but steady. His heart pounded like the rhythm of the desert wind outside. Steady unyielding, alive. Maya tore another strip and wrapped it tight around his ribs, fingers brushing his skin. The contact made him flinch, not from hurt, but from how long it had been since anyone had touched him without anger. She noticed. Her hand lingered. "I saw the way you looked at that boy you killed," she said softly. "The one in the tunnel." Jonah swallowed hard. He wasn't a boy, but you still grieve him. He didn't answer. She sat back, studying him. "You've lost someone before." His gaze drifted toward the ground. "My wife, my son." She closed her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "What happened?" He hesitated. But something in her stillness, the way she listened, drew the truth from him like a wound reopening. "Raiders hit our place 3 winters ago. I was out hunting. Came back to find the roof gone, walls burned, their bodies under the ash. Folks said it was your people." She looked down, grief washing over her face. "And you believed them?" Jonah's jaw tightened. "I didn't want to. But hate don't wait for proof." She reached out then, slow, trembling, and touched his cheek. "And yet, you saved me." He closed his eyes under her hand. Maybe that's why. The silence between them deepened, full of things neither could say. He turned his head slightly, his lips brushing her wrist. "You don't have to stay with me," he whispered. "If they find us, it'll be because of me now." "I won't leave you," she said. "Maya, I won't." The way she said it wasn't loud, but it carried more conviction than any promise he'd ever heard. She tightened the bandage, then sat back beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a long while, they said nothing. Only the crackle of the lantern and their breathing filled the air. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than the dust. "You asked me why my people called me traitor." He looked at her. "I didn't lead the soldiers to them. But I knew they were coming, and I didn't warn anyone. I thought if I talked, if I reasoned, I could stop it." Her throat tightened. "I thought words could stop guns." Jonah's hand found hers. Rough palm, warm touch. "Words don't stop guns," he said. "But they can stop a heart from turning cold." Her eyes shimmered. "You think mine isn't already?" He smiled faintly. "If it was, you'd have left me to die back there." She turned toward him, eyes wet but bright. "You don't understand, Jonah. Everything I touch burns." "Then let it burn," he said, voice fierce, low. "I've been cold too long." The words hung between them. Fragile, reckless, alive. She stared at him, searching for deceit, finding none. Then, slowly, she leaned forward. The space between them closed like dusk swallowing the day. Their lips met, hesitant at first, then desperate, as if they were kissing to stay alive, to steal warmth from the ashes of the world. His hand found her back, pulling her close. Her fingers slid into his hair, the taste of dust and blood mixing with the salt of tears. The lantern trembled on its hook, casting their shadows in wild, trembling shapes across the stone. When they finally broke apart, both were shaking. Maya rested her forehead against his. "This is madness," she whispered. "Maybe," Jonah said, his voice rough. "But it's ours." She let out a trembling laugh that sounded almost like the beginning of hope. Outside, thunder rumbled, a storm rolling over the desert. Rain began to fall through cracks in the rock, soft and distant, the first in months. The sound filled the mine like a heartbeat. Maya leaned back, eyes closed, listening. "My people said rain means the spirits forgive." Jonah's gaze lingered on her face, the strength in it, the fragility. "Then maybe tonight, we both get forgiven." She smiled faintly. "If the spirits forgive us, who'll forgive the world?" He touched her chin, lifting it. "Maybe love will. They sat together through the storm, sharing silence, warmth, and a sliver of something that felt like redemption. But outside, the desert didn't forget. When dawn came, the rain had stopped, but fresh hoofprints marked the mud outside the mine. The posse hadn't given up. They had simply waited for daylight. Jonah woke first. He watched Maya sleeping beside him, her face peaceful for once. Then he saw the light on the wall, flickering, moving, firelight. "Get up," he whispered, shaking her shoulder. "They're here." Maya's eyes snapped open. She grabbed his hand. "Then we run again?" He looked toward the tunnel, then back at her. "No," he said quietly. "We fight." He loaded his last 2 bullets, handed her the knife. Their eyes met, and no more words were needed. As the first bootsteps echoed down the mine, Jonah thought of all the graves he'd dug, and how love, once it takes root in the ruins, refuses to die quietly. The echoes of boots came first. Slow, deliberate, the sound of men who believed they'd already won. Jonah and Maya crouched behind an overturned ore cart, breath shallow, fingers tight around steel and resolve. The morning light spilled faintly through the cracks above, catching on the dust motes that swirled like tiny spirits waiting to see who lived, who didn't. Jonah looked at her one last time. "If I fall, you run south. Follow the river until you find the bend. You'll see birds nesting in the cliffs. There's a valley there. You'll be safe." Maya shook her head, fierce and trembling. "Don't talk like that." He gave a faint smile, weary, crooked, achingly human. "Somebody's got to." Then the first shot tore through the quiet. Wood splintered. Dust filled the air. Jonah fired back, his rifle kicking hard against his shoulder. A man screamed, fell. 2 more advanced. The mine roared with chaos, thunder, echoes, fear, courage, all tangled together. Maya stayed low, her knife ready, her breath steady despite the pounding in her chest. She'd been hunted before, but never had she chosen to stand. Jonah fired again. The bullet caught a torch in a man's hand. Flames burst across the tunnel wall, licking the beams like hungry tongues. "Fire!" someone yelled. In the chaos, Jonah grabbed Maya's hand. "Come on!" They ran deeper into the mine, the light behind them turning orange and hellish. Smoke rolled through the tunnels, thick and choking. Every breath burned. At the far end, they reached a narrow shaft that led upward, daylight spilling faintly through the cracks above. Jonah boosted her first, hands shaking but strong. She climbed, coughing, clawing her way toward freedom. Halfway up, she looked down. Jonah wasn't moving. He stood below, swaying, blood dark on his shirt. "Jonah!" she cried. He looked up, smiling through the smoke. "You remember what you said?" She shook her head, tears cutting through the soot on her cheeks. "That you wanted to live," he said. "Then do it. For both of us." The structure groaned, beams snapping under the weight of the fire. A section collapsed, sealing the tunnel between them in a burst of dust and flame. Maya screamed his name until her voice broke, but the only answer was the sound of falling rock. When she clawed her way out into the open air, dawn had broken across the desert. The rain from the night before had left the world washed clean, or trying to be. Smoke rose from the canyon mouth, curling skyward like a funeral prayer. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, coughing, clutching the earth as if it might hold him somewhere beneath. Behind her, hoofbeats approached. Her first thought was fear, that they'd come back. But when she turned, she saw one rider, alone. The man with the silver badge. He reined in beside her, staring at the smoke. Who else was down there? She didn't answer. He looked at her. This thin, soot-streaked girl with eyes that had seen too much. Was it the outlaw? Her jaw tightened. He wasn't an outlaw. The man frowned. Then what was he? She rose to her feet, unsteady but proud. A man who remembered what mercy looks like. The badge glinted in the sun as the officer looked away. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said quietly, "You should go. Nobody'll believe your story. Not here." She nodded once. "They don't have to." He tipped his hat, then turned and rode off, his silhouette swallowed by the light. Maya stood there until the sun was high enough to warm her face. Then she began to walk south toward the river Jonah had spoken of. Each step hurt, each breath hurt, but each one meant she was still alive. Weeks passed. Somewhere beyond the border, where the desert softened into fields of sage and scattered oaks, a small cabin stood by the river bend. Smoke rose gently from its chimney, and a mare grazed in the tall grass near the fence. Inside, Maya, thinner now, but stronger, sat by the table, stitching a patch into a worn brown coat. Jonah's coat. She folded it neatly, then set it on the chair opposite hers. Beside her on the windowsill lay a wooden carving, a bird with wings spread wide, its feathers etched in flame. She had made it from the broken handle of his rifle. Outside, the sound of rushing water filled the air. The river moved steadily south, carrying dust and memory alike. Every dawn, she spoke softly into the wind. "You said love was colder than hate, Jonah Reed. But you were wrong. Love burns, and it keeps burning long after the fire's gone." She smiled faintly then, and for the first time, the smile stayed. People say the desert remembers everything. Every footprint, every gunshot, every name spoken before the wind carries it away. But maybe it remembers hearts too. Jonah Reed's cabin became nothing more than a pile of wood and story. Travelers who passed that stretch of the river would sometimes see a woman tending a small garden, her hair streaked with sun, her eyes fierce and kind. They called her the river wife, the one who lived where the water bends and the land forgets. When asked about the man she once loved, she would only say, "He wasn't perfect, but he was proof that even in a land built on revenge, a man can choose forgiveness." And that's the lesson the story leaves behind. A truth carved deeper than any bullet scar. That mercy is the rarest kind of courage. That forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the only thing strong enough to break the endless chain of hate. And that love, when it finally finds you, even in a place as dry and cruel as the desert, can turn the dust back into soil. Because every life, no matter how scarred, deserves one last chance to bloom.